everybody. Y'all have a good week. Ready for next week? Okay. Well, we had a great time up in the Starkville area last Sunday, first week, and thank everybody for their prayers and those who could make it with us up there. It was a really good time for fellowship and study. And today we're here now to study another parsha. And like so many of the parshiot from, well, I said Shemot to Devarim, but it's actually from Breshith to Devarim. Our parsha this week contains some of the commandments Yehovah spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, which he in turn was instructed to teach to the children of Israel. Now, given that Yehovah spoke all of his statutes and his laws and his ordinances from Mount Sinai, one has to wonder why this parsha alone is entitled Behar, from the mountain. Now, you studied ahead this week, I know. What do you think? Why is this the only one entitled Behar? Could be from the opening words. Could be they wanted to draw some importance to some of the commandments. And here today, this might be some of the ones that we would tend to forget or be unable to keep in the world of years to come. Now, the parsha itself spans Vayikra 25:1 through 26:2. And it covers the topics like the Shemitah year, which is the sabbatical year that occurs every 7th year in a 7-year cycle. The Yovel, the 50th year, it concludes the 7 Shemitah year cycles. Talks about the land, houses, servants. And Behar concludes with one of the most repeated commandments throughout the Torah. Guard my Sabbath, to which Yehovah adds in this passage, and reverence my set-apart place. The Sabbath is mentioned over 20 times in just Vayikra, this point so far. From 1:1 up until this chapter, 20 times he mentions the Sabbath. Now, beginning in Vayikra chapter 25, verses 1 through 7. We find the first commandments of this week's parsha, and it addresses that 7-year cycle we was talking about, the Shemitah. In verse 2, Yehovah establishes that after the children of Israel entered into the land, they were to allow the land to observe a Sabbath to Yehovah. How does the land observe a Sabbath? We don't work that land. The laws governing the Shemitah are simple. We are to work the land for 6 years, but the 7th year we are commanded to let it lay idle. We are not to sow our fields or to prune our vineyards. We can not reap what has grown. We can reap what has grown. We cannot reap it. I'll get it right here in just a second. What do you mean when we can't reap it? Well, it's okay to eat it for food. What's the difference? We can't reap it to store it, to sell it, try to put it up for the next year or whatever. But it's okay to go out and eat it for food. And not just for us, but our families, those who sojourn among us, our livestock, and the beasts of the field. All of his crops are for food. Now, in this passage, the Hebrew text uses the word haaretz, the land, referring to the land of Israel, right? And it's clear who he was speaking to. The children of Israel. His set-apart people. Which tells us that if an Israelite chooses to work the land during the Shemitah year, the sin is on that person for not allowing the land to rest. In fact, the 70-year exile in Babylon was based on how many Shemitah years Israel refused to let the land lay idle. So, after the 7 cycles of the Shemitah year, or 49 years, we're to sound the shofar throughout the land on the 15th day of the 7th month, which is Yom HaKippurim. And we are to proclaim the Yovel, which is translated a lot of times as Jubilee. And it is from the root word that means to bring home or to return to its proper place. which is the essence of what the Yovel is all about, is bringing things home. Now, some translations do have it as the Jubilee, but the ram's horn is also translated from the word Yovel, which is pretty significant considering we're commanded to blow the ram's horn. Now, as with the Shemitah year, we are not allowed to work the land or harvest any crops, though we are free to eat what crops grow up voluntarily in our fields. And although the Shemitah year is not announced by the sounding of a shofar, the Yovel is. Shemitah. Okay, sorry, that's it. Shemitah means seventh, the seventh year, yeah. Now, there is considerable debate over when the next Yovel will occur. That's safe to say. We debate everything. But there's really is. There's some serious debate, serious studying going on to try as best we can to determine when the next Jubilee, the next Yovel year will be. But when it comes, it will require the sounding of a ram's horn. And this may or may not include horns from other kosher animals. It does say from a ram's horn. There is, of course, the possibility that the next Yovel will not be introduced by men blowing a shofar, but it'll be a different shofar blown from the heavens. You know, I really thought when I said that, everybody was going to be excited. Like, yes, that would be great, you know. I mean, think about it. There is a possibility that the next Yovel year we hear will be introduced when the sound of the shofar comes from the heavens. And for those of you that decide y'all don't want to participate and stay here, I'll see you later. Now, during the Yovel, each one is to return to his possession, and each of us to his own clan, and each to his own possession. Now, the Torah is clear regarding the Shemitah, the seventh year, and the Yovel. But there are some questions in regards to their application, and that's what we're here to talk about. I mean, it's clear what it says in Scripture, even though I stumbled through a few lines there. What Scripture says is clear, but what about applying? You see, several times in Torah, Yehovah refers to the land, haaretz, not a land or not any land, but the land in regards to its commandments. And this has led many to question whether or not these commandments apply to those living in a forced exile from the land of Israel. What do we do? How do we approach these commandments regarding the seventh year and the Jubilee, the Yovel? I mean, really, y'all ever thought about this? I know we have, because we've talked about it time and time again. Are we required to allow the lands we currently reside on to observe the rest on the seventh year? And what about the Jubilee? How can we return to our own possessions and our own clans when the exile isn't over yet? These are difficult questions. And the answers are even more difficult to ascertain. And there are probably some of the things that Saul referred to when he says we have to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. We have to stop and think about these things. And to that end, I want to share a couple of thoughts with you, and would be glad to entertain your thoughts on them as well. The first thing I thought about is we are his people. We're his nation of priests, Kohanim. And we are a set-apart nation no matter where we live or what age we live in. We are his people. Secondly, in the same passage from Shemot 19:5 that he tells us we are a set-apart nation and a nation of priests, he also says for all the earth is his. So we should keep this in mind, and whether or not these commandments apply to those in exile, and endeavor to do as much of them as we can. Now, it's obviously we can't return to the land. I mean, how many of you went to Israel now would know exactly where your possession was? Really? Fortunately, that will be worked out for us in the time to come. But while we're still in exile, should we follow the commandments of Torah and let the land, since all the earth is his, lay idle on that seventh year? probably a better question is, do we trust him to provide enough on the 6th year to get us through to the next harvest? Even so, buying or selling houses or land, returning it to our own possessions and so forth, will be very difficult to enforce when dealing with those who are not in covenant with Jehovah. Imagine if you go out and buy land from somebody and it's supposed to return to them. You can imagine all the problems that come living in exile, but it's not impossible things to work out if we plan ahead. Now, the remaining commandments of the Jubilee, the Yovel, are directed towards people, houses, and the land. If, as an Israelite, you sell something to another Israelite, or you buy something from your neighbor, guess what? It must be returned in the next Jubilee. You can't buy it forever. The price we pay for something, whether it's land, houses, or servants, is not dependent on the value the world puts on that piece of property, but on the number of years to the next Jubilee, the next Yovel. Imagine going in to buy land from a bank and saying, well, I know it's valued at so much and so much, but we're 36 years from the Jubilee, so it's only worth this much. They're probably not going to understand what you're talking about. This makes buying land difficult, not impossible, which raises another question. If we buy land that is not in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, and from someone who is not in covenant with Jehovah, is it returned to the original owner during the year of Jubilee? Who's got the answers? Okay, also included in the laws of the Yovel are commandments regarding buying and selling houses, at least from one another. If a man sells a house in a walled city, the right of redemption extends for only 1 year after it's sold. If it is not redeemed within a complete year, then the house is beyond reclaim and it belongs to the buyer. If the house is in an open village, however, the right of redemption does not expire and it's returned to the original owner during the Yovel, and it is not redeemed if it's not redeemed beforehand. We don't have many walled cities and open villages left, do we? Yeah. I guess the whole point of this exercise in studying the commandments is realizing that within the land of Israel, living under Torah, this is the way the Father tells us to conduct our business. It's not about the value of the land, it's about time and ownership and something else that we want to focus on during this Midrash this week. Well, we see that living in exile in a land not governed by Torah presents a multitude of challenges for the people of Israel. It's hard for us to function according to the rules and commandments of Torah in the world we live in today, because the world does not recognize the Father's sovereignty. And that's just the simple truth of it. The Father set how his people is to conduct business, and yet so few of his people do. And it goes on in verses 35 through 43. Jehovah establishes laws governing when a brother becomes poor. It is up to us, not the government, not the banking system, to strengthen our brother, even to the point of letting him live with us like a ger or a sojourner. It's our responsibility. We don't put it off on somebody else to take care of a brother. If we loan him money or food, we are forbidden to charge him interest or profit by doing so. What's the difference between charging him interest or profiting? If we give him food. What if you give him seed to plant? You give it to him, and you don't get anything back for it. Although unlikely to happen in our lifetime, if a brother sells himself to another Israelite, we're forbidden to make him serve as a servant. He is to be treated as someone you'd hire to do a job and cannot be treated harshly. And one's a little more difficult, but the Torah also addresses male and female slaves purchased from among the Gentiles, the nations, which some translate as slaves, others say servants, from the same root word. And there are several commandments throughout Torah that forbid mistreating a servant or a slave, but they're different from bondservants. And the commandments in 44 through 46 distinguish between the two. Bondservants are from among Israel, slaves are from the nations. But keep in mind that while in exile, purchasing and owning slaves that become the inheritance of our children is not allowed under the laws of most nations. This means this is not something that will have an impact on our lives today. But Parsha Behar comes and closes with another warning that we are not to make idols for ourselves that we bow down to. That seems like a pretty easy commandment to follow, doesn't it? Not to go out and make an idol or a carved image and bow down and worship it. I mean, most of us think we're beyond all of that in our world today, aren't we? The difficulty of honoring this commandment comes in recognizing and identifying what things can become idols to us. Not all idols are made out of physical wood or stone or gold or silver. Idols can and do take on many forms. And our world today, at least from my perspective, holds many more opportunities for idolatry than our forefathers faced. Think of the things that people idolize in our world today. I mean, there was a program on sometime in the past, it's called American Idol. Right? How many of you know of idols people worship? Have you ever stopped in your own life to try to identify something that may be an idol in your life? So when we talk about idols, especially we read the Tanakh, we think about people that went out and carved a face in a tree or shaped up an Asherah pole or took a stone and carved some kind of image and they bowed down and worshiped it. It seems kind of silly when that idol couldn't even carry itself. You had to pick it up and carry it wherever it went, but they did. Yeah. And I opened this midrash with the last commandment given in Behar. And that was that we guard his Sabbath and reverence his set-apart place. Now, given the number of times we're commanded to guard his Sabbath, to remember and do his Sabbath, and the fact that the Messiah guarded the Sabbath, and it was his practice, and he went in and he taught in the synagogues on the Sabbath. What do we do about the Sabbath in our world today? I mean, it's obvious with the number of times that the Sabbath commandment is repeated that this has got to be one of the weightier commandments of all Torah. Number 4 on the list of the top 10. I want to get completely off these notes because they're not doing me any good right now, and I want to ask you, how many people do you know that you genuinely care for? Family, friends, loved ones, that are not keeping the Sabbath? How many of you know people who were created in the image of Elohim, who Elohim loves, that are not guarding and keeping the Sabbath? We all do. Messiah said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Keeping his commandments requires us to not only guard them ourselves, but teach others to guard them. What happens if they don't listen? How do you know whether or not they will listen? We're commanded to be a light to the nations. So I want to ask you, and it's really been heavy on my heart these last month or so, to start teaching the world about the Sabbath. We have to start somewhere, right? And most of you that wound up here, or got led here, I guess I should say, came because of questions about the Sabbath. How many of you started out with wondering about the Sabbath when you were worshiping on Sunday and wound up seeking more and more the truth and came to Torah observant congregations? So if we got to start somewhere trying to reach a world that's rapidly falling away, I suggest we start with trying to reach them with the truth of the Sabbath and pray that they listen. Pray the Holy Spirit prepares their hearts. So if you've got ideas, ways, thoughts, or anything of ways we can get this out, teachings we can put together, ways to get it out to the public, come talk to us. Let us know. Let's really focus on teaching about the Sabbath, because as most of us have learned, when you start keeping the Sabbath, the other ones get a whole lot easier to keep. Now, the importance of the seventh year, the Jubilee, the rite of redemption, is obvious in this week's Torah portion, this week's Haftorah portion. But what about the significance they play in our lives today? What do we do about this Shemitah? And for me, the question is answered in the portion we read from Luke today in the second writings. Because the Messiah taught that the Spirit of Yehovah was upon him because he had been anointed to bring the good news. Through him, the poor will be taken care of. Now, he's seated at the right hand of the Father, right? Right now? And right? And what did he tell us to do while he was away? Huh? He said, the works that I do, you go do. And he stood up in a congregation in Nazareth, which is a little bitty building, okay? And he said that the Spirit of Yehovah is on me because I've been anointed to take care of the poor. And in this week's Torah portion, he said that we as his people are to take care of our brothers who become poor. But he also said the poor would always be with us, which means we will always have opportunity to fulfill this commandment. The poor are there for our benefit in some ways. He said he's going to heal the brokenhearted. You know, we talked about in this morning's study about how in the book of Revelation and in the prophets it talked about eating that little book and how sweet it was in their mouths, you know. But then when it got to their stomachs, it was bitter. And Dale shared what so many of us knew and felt ourselves about when you first start learning this word. It's so sweet in your mouth, and it's just so wonderful. You know, you just want to jump up and praise. But then when you start going to people and try to share it and they reject it, it gets bitter in your stomach because it's just hard to see people reject it. They're brokenhearted. And captives, which would include servant and slave, are going to be released through him. The blind are going to see. And that's not necessarily always a physical blindness either. Crushed ones will be sent away with the release. And to proclaim the acceptable year of Yehovah. He doesn't give a definition of the acceptable year of Yehovah, but what year do you think that is? Take a guess. Say something. Millennial? Jubilee year? I mean, just think, if you knew you were in debt, bound up as a servant, brokenhearted and felt like you were crushed by the weight of the world, and all of a sudden the Jubilee year comes and the shofar sounded, and the master comes in and said, "Up, you're free to go. You and your children and whatever you've acquired," how would you think you would feel? That's a pretty acceptable year of Yehovah. Of course, he could be talking about the year the Messiah returns.
Isn't it the same
Yeah.
year really?
Mm-hmm.
Free from your bondage.
And just think, if he returns in the next Yovel, and we hear the shofar sound, the Messiah is going to return us to our proper place and give us our inheritance and the land that we all long to be in. Wow. So that's the laws and the commandments, right? And this is what we think about. We're to take care of our brothers who get poor. If we buy a house from them, we buy it knowing it's going to be returned to them in the Jubilee unless they redeem it before then. So you see there's something deeper in this passage. It's more than just about houses and land and the rights of redemption and all this kind of stuff. And it's a lesson that we cannot overlook. What do you think that basic, fundamental lesson is about these commandments in this week's Parsha that was spoken from Mount Sinai? What are they really about?
Don't get too deep in the world because why would you try to gather up a bunch of stuff if you're just going to have to move again and keep moving and keep moving?
That's a good point.
Stay light.
Now, there is a rabbi in England named Jonathan Sacks, who he's a little liberal in some things, but he's very articulate in what he writes, and I occasionally enjoy reading what he writes. And I'm going to quote something that he wrote a few years ago. He said a few years ago there was this was in the 80s. There was an advertisement at Chase Manhattan Bank in New York City. And their slogan read, "You have a friend in Chase Manhattan Bank." And under the sign, an Israelite had written, "But in the bank of Lamui, you have a mishpachah, a family." And that's what these commandments are about. It's about learning to live as a family together. We are a family. And we are to take care of one another. First and foremost. We are to help those who stumble. We're to support the poor. Our Father doesn't expect us just to be able to recite love our neighbors ourselves. He expects us to live it. And that's part of what's wrong with our world today, I think. We're so into cliches and cute little sayings. And we think we learn these little cliches and we can pass them along to somebody and it sounds so good. We have fulfilled our obligations, right? We've given them some encouragement. But if all we do is give somebody that's hungry encouragement and we don't feed them, what have we accomplished? It's not about cliches. It's not about being able to quote the commandments. It's about being able to live them in such a way that everybody around you is better off because you're keeping the commandments. We talk about the rewards we get for guarding the commandments, and they are there. I mean, I'm living proof of that. But I think the real test comes, are the people around us better off because we are guarding the commandments or not? So it's about family. I'm going to say this too. This is a wonderful family to be a part of. And even with the responsibilities we inherit as part of this family, which is those responsibilities we get, and we just read of some of the responsibilities we have toward one another, right, as being part of a family. And there's a couple more books of commandments that's going to teach you even more of the responsibilities you have as becoming a part of Elohim's family, and taking care not only of a brother, but neighbors. Samaritans you meet on the road when you're trying to get somewhere. As much as those are responsibilities, commandments, and obligations, they are blessings as well. They're blessings in themselves, because when we do them, not only do we get blessed, but the people around us get blessed. So we've got to get the mentality of we're a family, protecting a family. And if you're not part of Yehovah's family, let me encourage you to join in. But don't waste time becoming part of Elohim's family. There's a deadline to entering in coming. Just like there was a deadline in Noah's day. So if you're wondering about what it means to be part of Elohim's family, you've come to the right place to learn, I hope. I know. And we want to encourage you. The world takes and takes and takes. The Father gives and gives and gives. And we're his children, and he learns and he teaches us, not learns us, he teaches us to give as well. This is Memorial Day. What is Memorial Day all about? What's it about today, though? So Memorial Day is honoring, basically for us, veterans, people who gave their lives in wars so that we could enjoy this land. It's about honoring people who gave so that our lives would be better off. How appropriate it is that we're studying that here today on commandments that when we live them, other people are better off. Now, how many people in here had somebody in their family or knew someone very close that gave their lives in one of the way too many wars we've had in this country? And you'd like to remember. I think that counts too, because the scars of war never leave. You know, what you see in a war, even if you survive, it's going to shorten your lifestyle. So how many would like to remember somebody that served that's gone on, that's not with us today?
Our Uncle Tony Walker.
Okay.
My dad, while he was in Hawaii, his dad passed. He didn't even see him. Young man.
Right. Yeah, if you stand up, people can hear you better, okay? Who else? Michael?
My dad, he served in the Army and in the Navy.
Now stand up and say it.
My dad, he served in the Army and the Navy.
Okay. Rita?
Phil Gizzard, my husband's father, passed away. He was a captain. He was 3 years old, and Robert was 3 years old. His father passed away.
Okay.
My scoutmaster is Jim Burgum. He served as scoutmaster from 1969 until passed away recently.
Amen. Yes.
My grandpa, he served in World War II in the Navy.
Okay. Chris? Okay. Anyone else?
Buddy Miller, my dad, he served in the Army in World War II, and also all of the unknown soldiers.
Amen. Mr. West?
My uncle served in World War II, and my great-grandfather served in the war in Northern Prussia.
Okay. Please. Who else? Uncle George, a couple cousins, Uncle Jack. So
My grandfather, Edward Dickinson, was a German immigrant that turned around and became a Green Beret.
amen. So,
My daddy, Tippy Wheeler, was in the army in Germany, and then my family has a very unique thing that we have letters that are in the Smithsonian right now that from the Civil War. I have a long history of family that we can trace them all the way back to the Civil War. Letters that they wrote back home and stuff. So many people that have uncles or great grandfathers and stuff.
and a lot of us have family that served on both sides during that. So tragedy of tragedy. Anyone else? It's good to honor those that gave so much to better our lives. And so we like to recognize their name. We don't want them forgotten. Okay? They deserve to be remembered for the sacrifices they made. But just beyond just standing up and recognizing their names, we should take a lesson from them and from Torah. Live our lives so that everybody else's lives are better. Okay? We may not all fight in wars. Hopefully, we'll never have another son or daughter that have to go off and fight in a war. But whether you fight in a man-made war or not, we're in a spiritual warfare. And so let's honor them and honor our Father by living our lives so that everybody's lives around us is better. Okay? Mm-hmm.
My great uncle, Bill Williams, he just passed away last year. He was 96 years old, and he was in the Navy in World War II. And he told, I don't even, well, I can't even count 30 some odd great grands and all that stuff. He always made sure to tell everybody and show pictures and kind of make it a remembrance of what happened.
Amen.
Somebody I remember. Robert Stubbs, is an uncle by marriage, passed away, and he was in the Air Force. He was a radio operator, and he was one of the few people that everywhere he went, he took a picture of all the different planes. You know how they had the emblems on the front, and usually it was a girl of some sort or whatever, and he
Well,
has the
not of
largest.
some sort. But
He had the largest, I guess, album that he documented all of the World War II planes.
wow.
And he died this year.
Okay, with that, I'm going to say anything else? But I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom, but then I'm